So I just made a video talking about the top 10 best movies of 2025 so far, so now let's talk about what I think are the top 10 worst movies of 2025 so far. Now, of course, as stated in the top 10 best movies of the year so far, this list will probably change throughout the rest of the year, but honestly, these 10 are pretty bad, so maybe only a couple will change throughout the year. But before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on push notifications, but let's get into the video. Starting off this list very, very, very low with Flight Risk, which I believe to be the worst movie of the year. I really don't think that this movie is going to be moving from the worst movie of the year slot, but yeah, Flight Risk is definitely a risk taking. So unfortunately, I saw this in theaters and it was just a horrible movie experience. I mean, the first shot that the movie opens up on is an AI generated motel in a blizzard. It is without question one of the most poor movies that I have seen in recent years. And a big reason why I am just so disappointed and why I don't like this movie at all is because Mel Gibson is the director. Mel Gibson, I mean, just like a legend in Hollywood, and he directed this crap. It really does not make sense because he has directed some of the most influential films of all time. So going from directing some of the most influential and important films of all time, to directing a movie that uses AI is so terrible. So basically, Flight Risk is about Mark Wahlberg, who plays a pilot that is taking two people to their designated location, but while they're on this flight, they realize that the pilot is actually a psychopath. And yeah, I mean, that is literally it. Nothing interesting in this movie happens. The ending is terrible. The acting is so bad. And it's just like, I laughed at one part and it was like a poop joke because it was just so out of place and just so like shocking. But other than that, nothing about this movie is redeemable. It is a irredeemable piece of crap. Next on this list is a movie that's honestly not too far behind Flight Risk, and that's Kind of Pregnant. Or I guess not Kinda Pregnant. It's another failed Amy Schumer crap comedy movie that is just garbage of consuming media. It's so bad. It's unfunny. It's kind of just offensive towards pregnant women, and it's just like, why would they make this? And you know what? I mean, why is it so bad? Well, Amy Schumer wrote it. I mean, they have some jokes in here that are just so vulgar, so out of place. Like, I don't mind a vulgar joke, but when it's out of place, it's just like, okay, you really just wanted to say that really disgusting joke, but it's honestly not going to make any sense in the story. I just want to say it's so bad. So yeah, this movie was garbage. It's not sweet. Amy Schumer always puts her in a role of being a terrible person and then is redeemed by the end of the movie, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense why she writes it like that, but it's just like, how do they greenlit this crap? I don't get it. Next on this list is one of my more recent watches, which is Hurry Up Tomorrow, the new Weekend movie. I mean, technically it's a movie, but it really feels like a 2-hour-long music video with very, very, very little plot, and it was just very hard to get through. So Hurry Up Tomorrow is basically a story that's based off a true story that happened to Abel the Weeknd, in which he loses his voice before a concert, and that kind of really diminished his like self-confidence when it comes to performing, and that's what this movie is based on. And you know, I've seen a bunch of bullcrap online talking about how Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan's character are the Weeknd, but they're different versions of the Weeknd, and then by the end of the movie, those characters are destroyed, and it's kind of like the overcoming of those parts of him. But yeah, that would have been a cool idea if they'd have like done it properly and not done it in a way that just feels like a promotional tactic for his album, which is also called Hurry Up Tomorrow. I love The Weeknd. I absolutely love The Weeknd. I love his music. I think he's a really fun person. We got to see a lot of his personality when it came to like the the press junkets for this movie, like we got to see a lot of his personality come out, which we don't typically see when it comes to musicians, and especially The Weeknd. We don't really see much from him. We just kind of see that performing side. So that was pretty cool. But that has nothing to do with the movie. That just has to do with The Weeknd. And the movie is just so not good. The Weeknd, I mean, people have been like bombing The Weeknd on his performance and his acting, and honestly, I do think that he does have a bad performance, but you know, in moments where it's not serious, I think he's kind of just playing himself, and that saves him from having a terrible performance. But then when there's scenes of him needing to be serious, yeah, those performances are very, very, very cringy. Not going to talk too much on this movie. I already made a review on it if you wanted to go check that out. But yeah, this movie was just not good. Next on my list, I have The Electric State, the new Russo brother movie that stars Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown on Netflix, and it is one of the most expensive movies of all time, which makes you wonder if it's actually money laundering and they're just making this slop of a movie so that they can launder money throughout Hollywood. I doubt that's probably what's going on, but you never know. But yeah, so this movie is a piece of crap, and it's really unfortunate because I think the Russo brothers are talented. I mean, I think they've proven themselves to only be talented when it comes to directing a Marvel project, and I say that with the utmost sincerity because I'm just being honest. The movies that they make outside of Marvel were just not good. Too long, just too formulaic, just too stuffed with crap. Not good performances, they focus way too much time on the CGI to the point where the CGI doesn't look that great by the end of the movie. And not saying that the CGI looks terrible in The Electric State. I think the CGI looks good for what they're trying to do. But if you have seen the art from the Electric State novel or the Electric State like book, they could have done so much with this movie when it comes to the CGI. If they'd have gotten like different directors, I'm trying to think of a couple. Like a lot of people were talking about how Gareth Edwards would have been a much better director to helm this project, and I personally think that Greg Fraser should have been the cinematographer on this movie because holy crap. Like I know that was the same that was the same duo for like The Creator, but The Creator is also a futuristic movie, and that was super cool. I love The Creator. This movie is similar in the aspect of, technology moving forward and it's sort of changing, the way people treat others. But just this movie was a fail. It was an absolute fail. And it hurts to see that a movie that failed so hard could have been something so good. Valiant 1 is a movie that is based on one of the director's friends that is a veteran that went through a very similar situation like how these characters went through in this movie. But as much as I can respect that, the movie is just very boring and not interesting, and there's a lot of weird aspects throughout this movie that just did not make sense to me. Like how they randomly start playing rap music in very weird situations and where like they're running away from bad guys and they're just playing this like very weird, just out of place rap music, and it just did not make sense. Also, they tried really hard to make this movie cinematic, even though they're on a very low budget. So it was kind of just like, well, we have this budget, but we want to make it big. So we're going to make it big anyways, even though it's not going to look good, rather than, controlling what they can actually do with the budget that they had to focus more on the story, which unfortunately they didn't. But we did get a movie this year called Warfare that is very similar in the aspect of that the co-director Ray Mendoza is a veteran, and the movie is based on memory, which was a really cool tagline for that movie because it was a movie entirely based on a memory. It starts and it doesn't really end. It sort of is just a moment in time, and that's what made that movie so freaking good. This movie just wasn't good. Next, I have You're Cordially Invited, which at first, there were a couple things that I laughed at throughout this movie, but honestly, by the end of it, I was like, wow, this just took a very bad turn to like, man, I was kind of enjoying this at first, but then it got weird, unnecessary, and just, I wish I didn't watch it. Captain America Brave New World, honestly, is probably one of the biggest disappointments of this year because the trailer looked good. I thought we were going to go back to our roots of like Winter Soldier vibes and, all that stuff, and it was really really, exciting to see Anthony Mackie finally have a leading role in a Marvel project other than Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but having his own movie where he's Captain America. I was very much excited for that. But then they decided to just completely retcon any good ideas that could have been for this movie and decided to go with all of the bad ones. I liked Harrison Ford as Thaddeus Ross, but honestly, I will be honest that it was kind of distracting that it was a recast from William Hurt, and I know William Hurt has passed away, but I think it would have benefited more if they decided to just leave Thaddeus Ross's character with William Hurt, and just decided to go with a different villain. It's not like we needed Red Hulk to be in this movie. And not only was Harrison Ford a little bit distracting because he looks nothing like William Hurt, but also he doesn't have a mustache. If he'd had a mustache, it just would have been so much less distracting. I did like him as Red Hulk. Red Hulk was pretty cool. Unfortunately, we only got around 6 minutes of screen time with the full version of Red Hulk. But this movie was just such a letdown, because I really do like Anthony Mackie as Captain America. I think he's really good as the character, but it's just, there's way too much going on in this movie, and none of it was interesting. Fortunately, though, we do have Thunderbolts, which is a good Marvel movie, and finally brings us back to the roots, so I'm hoping that we stay in that line of good Marvel movies for the next, foreseeable future. Another big disappointment of this year is Love Hurts. I love Ke-Huy Quan. Ever since Everything Everywhere All at Once came out, I've, really have just loved Ke-Huy Quan and was really excited for him to finally have his first leading role in a movie. And, it's from the same producers of John Wick and all those really fun, action-packed movies, but this is definitely the worst one of those entire lines of movies. It's a Valentine's Day movie, which really doesn't have any sort of, connection to the story. It was kind of just like, well, we have a Christmas one, now we're gonna do a Valentine's Day one, and it's just like, okay, but why? I get it, love hurts, it's about family, but why did it have to be Valentine's Day? There's fun action, a very uninteresting story. It's one of those stories that has side stories of other characters finding love, so kind of like Love Actually, but just not done in a good way and very uninteresting way. But the action and Ke-Huy Quan kind of saves it from being a total disaster, but it's still not that great of a movie. Hell of a Summer is the directorial debut from Finn Wolfhard and his friend Billy Brick. I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce his last name. But yeah, so, this is a directorial debut. I always love me a directorial debut. It is kind of funny, though, how whenever someone has a directorial debut, it always turns out to be a horror movie, but that's besides the point. People love horror, and it's really fun seeing people directing a movie, so I was, of course, pretty excited for this one. But then when I was in the theater watching it, I was just like, wow, there's nothing actually original about this at all. And I think that not only is it not original, but it takes a very, used and burned out idea from horror movies like Scream and other movies like that, where it follows, there's one killer and then, oh my God, there's two. And oh my gosh, it's these characters that we knew all along. It's just like, okay, is there really anything, particularly original about this? And no, there isn't. And, unoriginality doesn't necessarily always mean it's going to be a bad movie, but then there's also just not good jokes, not good writing, pacing is kind of all over the place. Luckily, it's not that long of a movie, so it doesn't really, you're not really wasting too much time watching it. But, it wasn't not fun. I like me a good kill. But even then, they didn't really, do too many crazy things when it comes to the violence of the movie, so that kind of didn't save it totally. But I like me a fine slasher, and this was just a fine slasher, so yeah. And in the final spots of the worst movies of this year so far, I have Clown in a Cornfield. Now, this was a movie that from the get-go I was like, okay, this definitely looks like it's going to be a slog. It looks like it's a very under budget slasher movie, which they don't tend to be good. But then I started seeing people being like, oh wow, Clown in a Cornfield is actually, not a bad slasher movie. And I was like, oh, I like me a good slasher movie. I didn't think that this was going to be good, so I'm gonna go see it in theaters. So I saw it in theaters, and I was just not impressed at all. I mean, it had some fine like gore and whatnot, but characters were uninteresting. It wasn't super interesting as far as story goes. It, like I said, with like Hell of a Summer, kind of just formulaic. And they didn't, I know it's based off a book, and I never read the book Clown in a Cornfield, so I don't know how much it differs from the book, but there could have been so many cool like ways of, you know, making the murderers be like who you weren't expecting, because I expected them to be who they were the entire movie. They didn't really hide that at all. But yeah, I mean, I'm not super disappointed. I mean, I didn't really expect to, you know, like it, but I expected to like it a little bit more than I did, but it was kind of just everything that I expected it to be. Just a very, underdeveloped slasher movie that didn't impress me at all, but, you know, it's still a slasher. Slashers are hit and miss. They're either going to be really, really good and original and fresh, or they're going to be like this in Hell of a Summer, where it's just like, this is the same repeated garbage that, you know, well, okay, I'm not going to use garbage loosely. It's not garbage, but this is the same stuff that we see over and over and over again. But yeah, those are the 10 worst movies of the year thus far. I feel like the list will probably change. I'm sure there's probably going to be more stinkers coming out by the end of the year. But as of now, this is my top 10 worst movies of 2025 so far. What is your least favorite of the movie? What is your least favorite movie of 2025 so far? Let me know in the comments below. Like I said at the beginning, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on push notifications. But that brings you to the end of this video. I appreciate every single one of you for sticking around to the end of it. I will see you in the next one. But remember, your movie moment is right around the corner. See you in the next video.